Deep in the forest, my mate Gabriel and I were enjoying a brief moment of peace. However, upon returning to the village, I discovered a mysterious bouquet and a terrifying note on Gabriel's bed. Cain, the evil vampire, had infiltrated our territory. The note he left sent chills down my spine. I never got to pay my condolences at the funeral. What does this mean? Chapter 29, Part 2. The sensation of the wind ruffling my fur was exhilarating. It was dawn, and the orange glow of the rising sun filtered trees onto the forest floor below. My large paws trampled the ground as I sprinted through the woods, Gabriel's massive wolf from running alongside me. It was the morning after the mating ceremony, and for the first time in a long time I felt carefree. I knew Cain was lurking right around the corner, but I couldn't help but feel a burst of optimism. Will had his mate, and Maria had found hers too. I had been shocked to see the loving look appear in her eyes when she saw Cain, but I was undeniably happy for her. Maria deserved someone to love and take care of her. I had left the happy couple behind less than an hour when Gabriel and I departed, and I could still picture Maria's glowing face as she had her fingers intertwined with Cain's. She did not bear his mark yet, but I knew they would complete the process soon. To my surprise, Maria had elected not to have a ceremony with the pack. I assumed it had something to do with Cain, but I didn't pry. Now that both of my best friends were happy, all of my attention was on Gabriel. I wanted to enjoy these moments with him before our time ran out and Cain returned. I turned my head slightly, glancing at my mate. The muscles under his thick coat trembled as he took powerful strides, and my wolf admired his form. Noticing my blatant stare, Gabriel's head swiveled and his eyes surveyed me. If I was in wolf form, I would have blushed, but instead I hastily returned my gaze to the path ahead of me. I knew I was acting like a hormone adult teenager. But well, I was a hormone adult teenager. My 20th birthday was in a few days, but I felt like a shy high school girl all over again. Being around Gabriel left me with muddled thoughts and lustful impulses. Honestly, I didn't mind. Until we completed the mating, I knew my desires would only get worse. Is something bothering you? His voice interrupted my thoughts. No, I was just thinking. I spoke a bit too hastily to sound innocent. About what? I was prepared to just say nothing. Before I realized something, we were accepting each other as mates now, which meant we needed to be completely open with each other. Even with something as minor as this, it would improve our relationship if I was frank with him. Plus, I wanted to see his reaction. About how you look while you're e-running, I replied before I could chicken out. Part of me absolutely could not believe I just said that. My wolf was content, but I felt completely embarrassed. I was horrible at flirting. Apparently, Gabriel's look had darkened considerably, and I detected lust intermingled with incredulity. Is that so? Was all he said, but there was emotion lingering underneath. I didn't say anything back. Instead, quickening my pace to leap over a fallen, I wanted to be open with Gabriel, but that was just plain embarrassing. My hormonal side was definitely getting to me. My wolf wanted me to jump his bones here and now, and it was harder to resist the urge while in this form. You don't have to be embarrassed, Skylar, Gabriel said, and I thought I sensed a hint of amusement coming from him. Well, never mind. You're going to have to refrain from those types of comments for now, he continued, saving me from my stammering. I don't think my wolf can take much more. I shuddered slightly at the implication. It sent pleasant chills up my spine. I'll try. My wolf definitely wanted to push his buttons, but I forced her primal urges back. I was not getting marked in the middle of the woods like a heathen. Even if I was part animal, I couldn't let her completely take over like that. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Gabriel grew quiet again, and our conversations over the next few hours were much more meaningless and light-hearted. Still, I could feel the sexual tension hovering just under the surface, threatening to break through. It was easiest for now to just keep my distance and veer away from the subject. By the time the Black Mountains Pack village was in sight, I was completely exhausted. Gabriel kept up a very fast pace that was more suited to an alpha than a normal she-wolf. Even worse, we'd only found his small rabbits during our single hunting stop. My wolf's stomach ached and her canines itched to tear into a deer or some sort of bigger game. The sun was setting, and I lowered my head as I trod DE down a steep hill. My paws were aching. I had only made the trip that fast when I ran after former Alpha Brett, and I had adrenaline on my side that time. I noticed Gabriel glancing at me out of the corner of his eye repeatedly as if to make sure I was collapsing. Moments later, he told me to shift, and I took cover behind a tree as I did so. Soon, the cover won't be needed. Technically HES our Alpha. We can shift in front of him. You know, my wolf chastised. I knew she was right, but I still felt incredibly modest and self-conscious of my naked body. Gabriel's sexual experience indicated that he liked his women a bit curvier. I wrinkled my nose with disgust, banishing thoughts of Ava from my mind. What was in the past should stay there. Besides, Gabriel had no choice but to be attracted to me. I was his. As we descended into the main part of the village and approached Gabriel's house, several wolves approached us and warmly greeted their alpha. I received some curious looks, but thankfully the pack didn't seem as hostile as last time. Then again, we were all part of the same pack now. I felt an automatic smile from on my face as my eyes fell on a hulking figure approaching. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Skylar. Eli greeted us, dipping his head respectfully. Welcome back. Eli. Gabriel acknowledged him, ever the talkative one. Hey Eli. It's good to see you again. I greeted warmly. Eli, as usual, genuinely looked pleased to see me. It seems the pack hasn't fallen apart under your care, Gabriel remarked, causing a slight smile to form on his beta's face. Told you we'd take good care of it. He folded his arms in front of his chest, causing the muscles to bulge. Eli may not have been as large as Gabriel, but he was close, and quite imposing, even for a beta. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I know you just got here, but there were some things I wanted to go over with you. I looked over at me guiltily as he spoke, as if he were apologizing for distracting my mate. How important? Gabriel asked tersely. Pretty important, Hal is flickered to me, not knowing what they could be referring to. Skylar, if you want to go put your things away, he'll meet you there. Gabriel's face held an expression I cowled in place. I sighed and nodded, hoping he would fill me in at some point. Eli sent me an apologetic smile and the two began to walk away, Gabriel tossing me one last look over his shoulder. It was only then that I realized he hadn't specified where I was supposed to put my things. Last time, I had chosen my own room, but we were a lot closer this time. Would I be staying in Gabriel's room with him? My wolf was definitely fond of that prospect. Smiling a bit sneakily, I decided to go ahead and unpack my things in Gabriel's quarters. He hadn't told me otherwise, and I wanted to seize every opportunity to be cozy with him. Humming aimlessly, I quickly made my way into Gabriel's grand home, practically skipping up the steps. It felt so different than the last time I was here. Sure, there was a menace hovering on the horizon, but Gabriel and I were close to being on the same page now. That had to count for something, right? I stopped on the top floor, glancing around as I felt a sense of déjà vu. The last time it'd been up here I hadn't exactly had permission. It just slept in Gabriel's bed without asking. Maybe this time HB be the one asking me. Come to think of it, I'd never seen Gabriel sleep before. He must be not needed as much rest as the normal alpha, what with his angel bloodline and all. I opened the large double doors to his room, inhaling deeply as I entered. Gabriel's scent was a faint, lingering presence in the area, and the room smelled floral. Somehow, he hadn't been here in a while. I set my bag down, scanning the room for a place to stuff my clothes, when my eyes fell on something sitting atop the neatly made bed. My eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Resting on the bed was a bouquet of flowers, which explained the flowery scent in the room. The flowers were tucked partially between a couple pillows, so I hadn't seen them immediately. I approached the bedside, wondering if somehow Gabriel had planned this as a romantic surprise. It wasn't exactly in character, but why else would someone leave flowers here? I gingerly lifted the bouquet from the bed. I was pretty sure they were tulips of some sort. But, as I glanced closer, I realized they were beginning to wilt. They had clearly been on the bed for a day or two at least. As I realized that, for some reason I felt a pang of unease. My wolf shifted restlessly in the back of my mind. The flowers seemed innocuous, but I cowed and quelled the pervading sense of nervousness. Slowly, my eyes slid back down to the bed, and what I saw there made my breath catch in my throat. Underneath the flowers was a small white note, folded so the contents were obscured. My brain immediately flashed back to the last couple of times I had found a note on my bed. My wolf whimpered as I felt a genuine flash of fear and goosebumps sprung up on my skin. I dropped the bouquet and took a few steps backwards. Staring wide, I did the bed as my heart rate continued to quicken. There's no way this place has protection like the Stone of Jacob. I tried to convince myself, rationalize it, but all of my instincts were still on high alert. It feels wrong. It had to be him. My wolf replied. I felt a sense of dread permeate my entire being, and I reached out a hand to pick up the note. I was about to panic, but I had to be sure. My brain was still scrambling to come up with another culprit that would help replace the flowers here. Swallowing hard, I unfolded the note. As soon as my eyes fell upon the familiar script, I let the note flutter through my fingertips and onto the ground as a wave of panic rushed over me. I never got to pay my condolences at the funeral the note had read. I knew immediately Cain was referring to Anna's funeral, but that was the least of my concerns. Cain had been here, in Gabriel's room. As the full realization that it was dusk outside struck me, I released all of my panic into a mental message to Gabriel. Gabriel, Cain has been here. There was a note on your bed. Yet it's almost dark somehow. Don't move. I'm coming for you. Knock the doors and windows. Gabriel's tone was authoritative, but I did not miss the shock and horror lingering underneath. Okay, Gabriel, how did he get in? The panic was still clear in my voice, and I attempted to continue our mental conversation to distract me from the thought that Cain could swoop into the room at any minute. It was just now dark outside. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. In a rush of movement I leapt towards the window, only to see it was already locked. Cain must have come into the bedroom doors. I pulled the curtains closed so nobody could see inside the room and, utilizing every bit of werewolf speed, I slammed the double doors shut and locked them, breathing heavily. I don't know. Hearing the worry so prevalent in Gabriel's voice worsened my fear. I felt perspiration beading on my forehead and I backed into the nearest corner, my eyes flicking across the room as if Cain would jump out and attack me at any minute. My breaths came in short pants and I clenched and unclenched my fists. My wolf was pacing in agitation. I felt a fresh wave of fear as I realized that Cain could still be here. The flowers had been left a day or two before, but he could have hidden in a closet, just waiting for us to come back. Any other vampire would have bravely stood up to, but I was no match for Cain. The thought of seeing him again terrified me, and as a werewolf, I was not used to this feeling of profound terror. Please hurry. He could still be here. I begged Gabriel, not caring how frightened I sounded. I felt his reassurance through the mind link, but I pressed myself against the wall, continuing to scan the room for the slightest sign of movement. Just stay where you are. Do you see anything? Smell anything? I hadn't caught any vampire scent, but they were hard to trace. The seemingly innocent flowers sat on the bed as if taunting me, and I could just see a corner of the white note poking out near the bottom of the bed. I gritted my teeth as anger melded with my fear. That despicable bastard would never stop taunting me until he died. Nothing yet, I replied shakily, feeling extremely vulnerable. I couldn't resist adding, I'm scared. Gabriel, hell never stopped doing things like this. He even wanted to take me with them in the woods. When I went after Anne, I'll rip his throat out if he touches you. Gabriel snarled furiously. I felt a tinge of warmth at his protectiveness, but the fear still presided, my heart thudding loudly in my chest. My wolf, like me, was on full alert. How far had Gabriel and Eli gone? Anyways, he had to almost be here by now, as if on cue. I heard the front door bang open. In half a second I caught Gabriel's fresh scent, and he was at his bedroom door. I had no time to ponder his incredible speed as I rushed to open it. Skylar. Rather needlessly, for I already scented him. I threw open the door and Gabriel barged in, dark eyes stormy and furious as he glanced around the room. His gaze landed on the flowers, his face contorting into a snarling expression as he made his way over to the bedside. I felt his incredible fury through the mating bond. He reached over and picked up the note, scanning it quickly before tearing it into shreds with a grimace. How could this happen? I thought you had something here that worked like the Stone of Jacob. We do. It was supposed to last at least another week. The only explanation I can come up with is that Cain is considerably more powerful than we thought. Unless our sword is weaker than Raziel initially predicted. If Cain can break through the sword's power here, then I'm not sure your rosary will last much longer. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. His eyes were burning with concern and worry, and I shivered. It was true that the rosary was only lukewarm against my skin now. What do we do? My voicemail. Gabriel began to pace, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I hadn't planned for this so soon. Everyone will have to stay inside. Doors and windows locked. At night, there's no telling where Cain will strike next, and no wolf is powerful enough to take him on. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. His eyes found mine and he hesitated. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She is too much of a coward to face me in person. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She is trying to lure me out. A strange expression flickered through Gabriel's eyes, but he banished it swiftly. He looked at me keenly, staring me up and down. Are you all right? Yeah, just it was unexpected. I didn't want to let on how rudely terrified I had been, but I was sure Gabriel could sense it. In an instant, Gabriel was in front of me and his strong arms wrapped around my small frame in an embrace. I froze for half a sec and before returning the gesture, burying my nose into his chest. His scent was soothing and I took deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. I never should have let you go off alone. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Self-loathing thick in his voice. It isn't your fault. You couldn't have known. I tried to reassure him. One of his hands ran aimlessly up and down my back, sending an entirely different type of chill shooting down my spine. Still, in not letting you out of my sight from now on. I backed away slightly and looked up at Gabriel to see him watching me with a hooded expression. It was like I was going to complain. He'll try to find another way to get to me. Gabriel gritted his teeth, the muscles in his jaw clenching. He can't have you. I think it has something to do with my blood. I didn't know it at the time. The Cain must be been referring to my affinity in the woods. I told Raziel everything you told me, and she has been looking into it. I've heard no word from him recently. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I shifted, glancing around the room wearily and rubbing my arms. My wolf was on edge now, and I felt much jumped by easier than usual. Every shadow gathering in the corners of the room was a menacing threat. Gabriel seemed to sense my unease and he made his way over to the fireplace in his room, which was well kept despite being smaller than the one downstairs. Within a minute he had set everything up and started a small fire, pulling out one of the small chairs. My mate gestured that I sit down, and I gratefully sank into the proffered seat. Just being around Gabriel was enough to calm me slightly, and I tried to take deep breaths to force my nerves and my wolf to relax. Seconds later, the bouquet from the bed had been tossed in the fire. I relished the sight of the wilted petals catching fire and crumbling into nothingness. Gabriel, meanwhile, poked and prodded into every corner of his room and his closet as if to make sure there were no vampires lurking about. I think he did so more for my benefit than anything, and I was profoundly grateful. I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he moved about. His lithe movements and muscular form never ceased to leave me awestruck. He began to pace again, countenance set in a rigid expression. I knew he was more than likely having mental conversations with Eli and Jack, and judging by Gabriel's posture, they weren't coming up with any novel ideas on how to get rid of Cain. I felt like we were sitting ducks, just waiting for Cain to strike again, add another werewolf death to the growing number. I stared back into the fire, not able to come up with any answers. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Raziel was our greatest living source of information, and he must have been having trouble interpreting the ancient book. We knew next to nothing about the ritual or the elements that comprised it, or even when it was supposed to take place. Now we had practically no protection against Cain. I could see why my mate looked so distressed. Wolves would continue dying if he didn't do something. Gabriel sank into the chair next to me, breaking me out of my depressing thoughts. The expression on his face pained me. He looked more downtrodden than I had ever seen him. Hopelessness was etched into his chiseled features. I felt completely useless. I was a future Luna, and I hadn't come up with a single idea. That was my job, to help Gabriel out when he was in a bind, but could think of no way to contribute. You could ease his stress. My wolf broke in, her first input in a while. How? You shouldn't have to ask. Realizing belatedly what she meant, I vainly tried to force the concept out of my mind. Now was not the time for inappropriate, lustful ideas. Gabriel wouldn't want the distraction right now. Anyways, as much as my body craved it, perhaps he would want the distraction. He can't do anything else about the vampires until daylight. Is everyone else safe for the night? I asked suddenly, attempting to distract my wolf. My thoughts were headed in a very dangerous direction. Gabriel looked at me, trying to conceal the hopelessness that still lingered in his eyes. Everyone is safe and accounted for. I nodded, twiddling my fingers and mentally chastising myself for acting so hormonal in a time like this. Gabriel surprised me by leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees and placing his head in his hands. Seeing him in such a position of defeat just made me want to reach forward and wrap my arms around him. I've never dealt with anything like this before, he finally said quietly. I blinked, not wanting to speak and ruin his train of thought. Gabriel was opening up to me and I didn't want to distract him. I've always had an answer, a plan of action. For this nothing. You'll think of something. It'll help you. We just have to keep trying. I tried vainly to reassure him. Wolves have been dying. Skylar, how many more have to die before Cain gets his way? Nobody's going to die. I argued vehemently. I couldn't see Gabriel like this. He couldn't give up. Gabriel looked up, his eyes boring into mine. How do you do that? Puzzled. Do what? You're so sure about things. So determined. Despite everything you've gone through, you still find inspiration and you keep fighting. And you don't. Gabriel said nothing. I used to despise your pack. Gabriel, I never understood why wolves would follow you when you could be so cruel. Now I understand. You're the perfect leader for them. You have fought and will fight for your pack, and you do sacrifice everything for them to make sure they're safe and have everything they need. Still, he didn't move. But I knew he was listening. You're the best alpha I've ever seen. You'll think of something. Just don't give up. They can't see you give up or fail. Lose hope, too. Gabriel raised his head and stared at me keenly for a moment, eyes glinting with something I didn't recognize. What? A bit embarrassed by his penetrating stare. That was a speech fit for a Luna. He replied quietly, and my cheeks instantly heated up. I looked away, muttering something incoherent as I tried to get a handle on my embarrassment. His admiring words did nothing to quell the feelings churning within me. Gabriel sighed and shifted to his former position, this time gazing into the fire as if it held the answers he sought. Comfort him, Skylar. Even to just hug him, he needs comfort, and HES not used to receiving it. I knew my wolf was right. It was the thing to do. As Gabriel's mate, he had never really received affection, but my touch would soothe him whether he was used to it or not. Slowly, I got up and made my way over to him until I was standing behind his chair. Gabriel remained lost in thought, perhaps a mental conversation, staring into the flickering flames that had eaten through the rest of the flowers and long since turned them into ash. Gabriel's tall form left his shoulders above the chair, and I tentatively reached forward and draped my arms over him in a loose hug, resting my chin where his shoulder and neck connected. I felt Gabriel stiffen slightly with surprise, but I closed my eyes, trying to soothe him through the connection of our bodies. After a few seconds, his tense muscles loosened, and I felt a small sense of victory. It felt so natural, embracing him like this. My wolf was stirring again, invigorated by our connection and instilling lustful impulses into my brain. It didn't help that his musky scent surrounded me and my skin felt hot where it was pressed against him. Almost regretfully, I loosened my arms and began to draw away. As soon as the contact ceased, Gabriel's shoulders hunched again and the tension returned. I couldn't help but remember my wolf's words from earlier, about a different way I could ease his stress. I had mixed feelings about the timing of everything, but I couldn't deny that desire was coursing through me due to our proximity. Not liking the tense way he sat, I felt my hands rest on his shoulders. I did not take time to think through my actions, instead reacting instinctively and on my wolf's commands. I hesitantly began to rub his shoulders, enjoying the feel of corded muscles beneath my hands. I really had no clue what out of my element in the physical relations world, but my wolf was practically directing my actions now. She could sense exactly what Gabriel and his wolf wanted, and for now, I was more than happy to oblige. I felt Gabriel's tension disappearing beneath my hands, but he remained partially rigid, more from surprise than anything, or so I hoped. The air in the room was thickening, and I could not help but feel I was approaching something that would not allow me to turn back once I breached it. Is this really the right time? I asked my wolf, but my tone was not very convincing, nor was the way I was thoroughly enjoying exploring Gabriel's neck and shoulders with my hands. Completing the mating bond is natural, especially now that Cain is right around the corner. What if something were to happen, and you never got a chance to mark each other? The thought was horrifying, and I pushed it away. But he needs time to think and plan. He also needs his mate. He needs the comfort we provide. I just feel as if I'm being selfish, just because of my lust that hasn't been sated. It's making me act on hormones when I should be helping him plan. It's unnatural that we have yet to complete the mating. Most wolves consummate the bond almost immediately after meeting. Our mate and his wolf feel tortured that they haven't found that sort of release since we met. You know this. I tried vainly to think of an argument, but my wolf and my instincts were becoming more and more convincing. Now is a better time than any. You never know what will happen tomorrow. The pack needs a Luna to stand by their alpha. For once, Skylar, follow your instincts instead of overthinking everything. I closed my eyes, knowing she was right. She was always right. I had to shut off my analyzing brain and do what the wolf inside of me wanted, especially since tomorrow was now completely unpredictable and there was danger on the horizon. I opened my eyes and glanced down at Gabriel to see him gripping the arms of the chair. I hadn't noticed during my internal conversation, but it seemed my touch wasn't exactly making him relax anymore. He was speaking, as if the surprise from my forwardness still silenced him. I cautiously glanced around the room. Gabriel had locked the door, and the window was in a similar condition with curtains drawn to obscure the view of an unwelcome outsider. Nobody could get in without us knowing. Stop, my wolf demanded, cutting off my analysis, more to prevent her reprimands than anything. I leaned forward and gingerly pressed my lips against the side of Gabriel's neck. He stiffened further under my touch, but I took this as a welcome sign and began to trail my lips down his warm skin. My arms released Gabriel's shoulders and draped across his torso once more. Gabriel made no attempt to resist, and I continued with more vigor, placing open, mouth kisses near his collarbone. Almost imperceptibly, a low growl resounded in Gabriel's throat. I trailed my hands across his chest and stomach, wishing his shirt did not obstruct my access. My mouth continued to move across every inch of skin on his neck that could reach before returning to the base of Gabriel's neck not covered by his shirt. Letting my instincts guide me, I opened my mouth further and trailed my tongue across his skin, right where I would mark him when we mated. This time Gabriel's growl was much louder. There was a blur of motion and I felt arms encircle me. A half-second later I was in a horizontal position on his bed, back pressing into the softness of the mattress as Gabriel hovered above me. My breath caught in my throat as I saw his burning expression, the clenched jaw. I reached down and hooked my fingers under his shirt, yanking it upwards towards me so he would know my intention. Gabriel obliged, gripping the shift and pulling it the rest of the way off before tossing it carelessly across the room. This left my eyes to fall upon his perfectly toned body and I blatantly checked him out. Reaching up a hand, I trailed it across his pectorals down to the muscles of his abdomen. Gabriel closed his eyes briefly. "Skylar, if you don't stop now, I don't think you'll be able to control myself much longer. I don't want you to," I rasped out, voice hoarse with lust. His eyes snapped open, desire swirling in their black depths. "You have to be sure. With everything that's going on, I'm sure. Gabriel, we've waited long enough." He breathed out heavily, eyes roaming across my still fully clothed body. "There's no telling what can happen tomorrow. We can't waste any time. I know the risks and I am willing to take them." Before he could argue more, I shifted position slightly and grabbed my own shirt, tugging it off of my small frame as Gabriel moved backward so I could maneuver. I was thankful for my wolf in this moment, because I followed her instincts. Since I had no sexual experience whatsoever, I had no clue how to be sexy or seductive, but I would try my best. When my shirt was gone, I glanced up to see Gabriel ogling my scantily clad chest shamelessly. A devouring hunger appeared in his eyes, and a second later his lips smashed against mine desperately, the force pressing me back against the pillow. The kiss was desperate and unyielding, and I opened my mouth to grant him full access as heat exploded within me. We shifted positions so we were laying side by side on the bed, all previous worries temporarily held at bay. Gabriel's hands burned trails of fire down my sides as they moved across the bare skin on my ribs, down to my hips and across my stomach, before finally reaching up and cupping my breast through my bra. I groaned slightly and pressed myself further against him, not used to the foreign sensation of being touched there. Gabriel made a noise deep in his throat, and his hand reached around, fingers tracing my spine before finding the clasp of my bra. I made no move to resist as he quickly undid the hooks and I shimmied out of the bra. With my chest fully exposed, I suddenly drew back, hesitating. I was not regretting my decision, but I could not prevent the sudden burst of self-consciousness that emerged. I was not what one would consider curvy, and had always been a bit embarrassed at my size in the chest area. No one had ever seen or touched me there before. What if Gabriel found me lacking? Despite my wolf's protests to the contrary, I found myself blushing and glancing away when Gabriel examined me, puzzled. "Is something wrong?" he asked, throat ly, his breath caressing my face due to our close proximity. "Am I just I don't want you to be disappointed," I mumbled in humiliation. My face was burning. "Disappointed? Yeah, well, there isn't a lot to find there." Hopelessly I gestured at my chest, berating my complete and utter lack of experience and eloquence. How was I messing this up already? "Sorry, I just don't want you." I started again when Gabriel didn't say anything, but he quickly silenced me by clamping a hand over my mouth. His expression had hardened and he looked angry. "Don't you dare apologize." He snapped at me and I could only sit there, blinking up at him, all too aware of my half-neckedness. I couldn't have asked for a more beautiful mate. Gabriel said solemnly, oozing sincerity, and I gaped at him. I realized she'd never complimented my physical appearance before, and I hadn't known how much I needed him to say it. My heart fluttered in my chest while my wolf crowed triumphantly. "Told you so," she said smugly, but she was quickly ignored as Gabriel released my mouth with his hand, only to touch his lips to mine again. This time, there was no protest made on my part as his hands roamed every inch of the newly exposed skin, caressing my breasts and causing me to whimper with the foreign sensations coursing through me. Gabriel's mouth left mine only to travel down my neck, leaving open, mouth kisses and bites that set my skin on fire. My hands fisted in his thick hair as his mouth reached the valley between my breasts. I felt the hairs on my body stand up in anticipation as a knee unfurled deep within me. I knew that my lust would not be sated this time until we completed the process we were too far along now for my wolf to be held at bay. His mouth finally found my breast and covered it, his tongue sliding along the surface and making me writhe with pleasure. His other hand roamed and cupped my backside firmly. He pressed me against his body and I could feel his arousal pressing against me, a sensation that only increased my wolf's drive to mate. I let my hands roam his bare body, my fingers tracing the musculature of his shoulders and back. "Gabriel," I choked out when I felt that my body had enough torment from his lips. His mouth found its way back to mine, slowly and deliberately touching every ounce of exposed skin on the way. I bit down on his lip, wanting to tease him as much as I could with my currently limited access. As expected, Gabriel growled in response and pushed me further into the pillows. His mouth moved feverishly upon mine, and just as I thought that he'd never come up for air, he pulled away slightly. Gabriel's lips were swollen and his eyes completely black. I knew his wolf was at the forefront of his consciousness, ready to take over. "Are you sure about this?" he asked huskily. His muscles were clenched with the visible effort of restraining himself. "Stop asking me that," I replied impatiently, my own need evident in my voice. I brought my mouth back to his and nipped his lip impatiently. As soon as I did so, Gabriel swiftly turned us so I was flat on my back again, his form above me. It only took him half of a second to remove his pants and I struggled to unbutton my shorts, kicking them off hastily. The air around us was warm, but I still felt a shiver course through me as I fully realized what was about to happen. Gabriel disappeared for a moment, getting up off of the bed, and I felt alone and bereft before he returned, clutching something in his hand. He almost looked sheepish and my eyes widened as I realized what it was. "I figured you wouldn't want to risk pregnancy." With everything, he trailed off. I nodded hastily, knowing he was right. Gabriel's chances of impregnating another she-wolf were next to none, because he needed the optimal bloodline, the perfect other half with the ability to bear his child. There were scarce few females in the world capable of childbearing with an alpha bloodline. The pregnancy was not easy, and not suited for the average female. However, as his mate, we had an exceptionally high chance of pregnancy, so it was wise to not take risks, especially now. Seconds later, he was completely unclothed and was setting the protection in place. I tried not to let my sudden burst of nervousness show I still could not fully comprehend how my fragile frame was to accommodate him. Cheeks a rosy red, I tried not to stare at his anatomy, instead sliding off my last undergarment. I did not miss the way Gabriel's eyes appraised me and the satisfaction that appeared in his dark orbs. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, an expression of tenderness crossing his features that I never would have expected before. He had really come a long way. However, the desire to take me completely was still clearly at the forefront of his thoughts. Mouth dry, I nodded, content with staring into his eyes. "You know, there's a chance that my mark will fade." I nodded again. I knew the risks, and I knew there was a chance it wouldn't work out. But I cowled and let Gabriel psych himself out of this. His wolf clearly wanted release and I'd already made up my mind. Instead of verbally affirming my agreement, I kissed him yet again, this time taking the initiative to deepen the kiss. Gabriel's breath left his chest in a rush and he gripped my hips. I pulled back and continued to stare at him, putting my trust in his leg. My wolf was yipping with excitement and I knew that this was it. This was one of the biggest moments of my life. I didn't regret it. My passionate feelings for Gabriel were not to be denied, and I knew they were deeper than I'd ever admitted to myself. He was worth it, and I closed my eyes to ready myself. It always had it would, but I tried not to visibly express the pain that radiated from my core. I gritted my teeth, and the pain did not last long as my body accustomed to the perfectly natural activity. After the pain passed, the pleasure began a slow build-up, and I threw my arms around Gabriel, throwing my head back as my wolf reveled in the pleasure. As I thought I was going to burst, I felt a strong hand wrap around the back of my neck. I opened my eyes to see Gabriel's face just above mine, eyes a pitch, black and fangs fully extended. He was in the thralls of his wolf's power now, and it was time to be marked. I felt my own wolf come forth, and my teeth followed suit. My nails dug into his bare back, but Gabriel didn't seem to mind, lowering his head and inhaling my scent as the pleasure coursed deep through me. With a feral growl indicative of the animal within him, Gabriel lunged forward, and I felt his teeth make contact with the base of my neck. It only hurt for a split second before a bolt of pure pleasure shot through me, and I howled, the animalistic sound radiating throughout the room. Gabriel's teeth sunk deep within the flesh, but I was not aware of the pain. The pleasure overtook everything and was more than I could have imagined. He pulled back, and I felt the blood beginning to trickle down the side of my neck. As was customary, my mate leaned forward and used his tongue to bathe the wound. My skin sizzled where it touched, and the pleasure only intensified. I'd always heard of the wonders of the mating process, but I could never have imagined all of these sensations. Our turn. My wolf growled, and I felt her words emanate from my mouth. She was in complete control now. I planted my hands on Gabriel's chest as he pulled away to stare down at me, pride and possessiveness radiating from his gaze. He tilted his head to the side, granting me full access. In that moment, I didn't care that his mark could fade. All I wanted was for my mark to be visible on his skin. With a lightning fast move, I lunged forward and sank my teeth into the spot at the base of his neck above his collarbone. I dug my canines in as far as they would go, reveling in the sounds that my action elicited from Gabriel. After pulling them out, I lazily ran my tongue to clean it the same way he had. The blood would stop flowing almost instantaneously, but his mark remained sensitive to my touch, and I felt his fingers dig into my skin. It may have been animalistic and primal, but cleaning the blood served the most important purpose. It truly bound us. It combined our essence, linked us as one. After we ingested each other's blood, even in such a small amount, everything changed. I could already feel it happening now. As I bathed the wound, I could feel an overwhelming presence pressing in upon my consciousness, and it was as if the missing piece of my soul had fallen in place. I could sense a powerful pleasure and radiant joy that were not my own. I knew everything that Gabriel was feeling now. We collapsed back down on the bed, breathing hard. Gabriel reached forward and interlaced my fingers with his. I had never felt so complete or content in my entire life. I gazed into his eyes wordlessly, for there was no need for speech. Everything we needed to know, we could say in our minds. I cuddled up against his large figure, disregarding our sweaty bodies. It was silent for a while as we peacefully basked in the moment. "You're Iluna now," Gabriel finally said, very quietly. I noticed that he had a hand fisted in my hair while the other was wrapped around me. "Let's hook him up for it," I joked weakly. "You'll be a great Luna," he replied seriously. "I only wish it could be at a better time." I nodded, reaching out and aimlessly tracing the muscles on his abdomen. My breathing had eased now, and I felt my wolf stirring again. She would never get enough of this. Gabriel was watching my hand, and I noticed his not so subtle growing excitement. My eyes found his to see them darkening further, desire in their depths yet again. We were werewolves. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And he was an alpha. We had much greater stamina than humans, and now that I had combined my essence with Gabriel's, I felt stronger. Somehow, it probably had something to do with the fact that it ingested some amount of angel blood. Gabriel's thoughts definitely echoed my own, because within seconds, he was on top of me again, pressing me back into the mattress and kissing me with renewed vigor. I definitely was complaining, and hour or so later, I drifted into a dreamless sleep. I felt peaceful and completely at ease, with newfound fulfillment that came with completing the bond with my mate. My wolf was completely satiated. I allowed my admittedly sore body to rest as I welcomed unconsciousness. Sometime in the night, I vaguely registered Gabriel stirring and making to leave the bed. Almost without meaning to, I reached out and grabbed his hand. "Where are you going?" I mumbled groggily, barely coherent. I felt him lean forward, his warm breath stirring the hair next to my ear. "Wazil is trying to contact me. In just getting the feather. He'll be back soon." I nodded, eyes still closed, accepting his explanation without question. This was the most hope we'd had all day. Anyways, it was good that Raziel was finally contacting Gabriel. Hopefully we'd have a new lead tomorrow. I made no attempt to stay awake, knowing HED returned to bed soon, with the newfound spark of determination that there would be answers soon. I drifted back into the best sleep of my life. I felt cold. The pronounced lack of warmth was what woke me up the following morning. I blinked my bleary eyes open, glancing towards the window nearby. The curtains still obscured my view, but I could see the light of morning creeping in around the edges. Yawning, I shifted position, wondering why I felt so chilly when I was cocooned in Gabriel's bed. I reached out a hand to Gabriel's place in the bed and Gabriel was already awake. The place he had been sleeping was cold. I frowned in confusion. Exactly how early had he gotten up? The room seemed empty without him in it. The bed seemed far too big. Groaning, I struggled to sit up. I was incredibly sore from last night. Remembering the passionate undertakings made my cheeks heat up a bit and I stretched, trying to work the kinks out. As I stood up, I realized I was completely naked still. This only made me blush more furiously and I hurried to retrieve some new clothes to wear from the bag it brought. As soon as I was clothed, I wandered into the bathroom. I had to see for myself the concrete proof of what had happened the night before. Putting down the collar of my T-shirt, I couldn't help but grin triumphantly. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. At the base of my neck was Gabriel's mark. It looked incredibly fresh but wasn't bleeding, and the dark red color would never change. It wouldn't fade to a lighter color like a normal scar. I traced the puncture wounds of his canines, remembering the feel of his teeth sinking into my skin. Suddenly, I realized that my wolf hadn't said anything yet. She was strangely silent. I prodded her with a mental probe, urging her to say something. "You awake yet? Something is wrong." Immediately, I tensed. My wolf sounded completely distraught. As I pondered over the possible causes of her worry and where Gabriel could be, I realized something I would have realized much sooner if he'd been used to the mating link. I felt nothing from Gabriel. No emotions, no mental link, nothing. I wasn't used to feeling Gabriel's every emotion, so I hadn't noticed the strange absence upon awakening. But now was all too aware that he had withdrawn from my mind. I stared into the mirror as my face paled. His mark couldn't have already faded. Could it? That was ludicrous. It would take much longer than one night. This is deliberate. He is blocking us. I cannot feel him. My wolf whimpered, and pain washed over me as her words hit home. Why would Gabriel do that? Mates were never supposed to block each other out. The only thing I could think of was that he was suffering some sort of unmarking me from it, or keeping some secret from me. What if it had to do with Raziel contacting him last night? I bit my lip, coppery taste filling my mouth. I suddenly felt very, very alone and exposed. I couldn't help a surge of anger from emerging, that Gabriel would just mentally abandon me like that without a word. I strode back into his room and glanced around, seeing no note or any indication of where he was. "Gabriel, are you there?" I tried to contact him, but my wolf was right. It was like hitting a mental brick wall. I could still feel our connection, distant and tenuous, so I knew he hadn't died. However, I didn't feel his consciousness directly pressing up against mine. He was completely withdrawn. There was something blocking my link to him. According to my wolf, it was Gabriel himself. It took a lot of mental focus to block one's mate, so it had to be deliberate. I felt a wave of panic rising and I attempted to squash it as I strode out of his room. I needed answers, and the only person I could think of was Eli. Perhaps he'd known where Gabriel had gone. There was also a chance Gabriel was lurking about the pack village or out in the woods, and I had to find him. As I walked into the bright sunlight and tried to catch Hell's or Gabriel's scent, I continued my efforts to link Gabriel. To no avail. I was definitely being blocked from my own mate. It took me half an hour to find Eli at the training grounds, and in that moment I didn't care if I was interrupting a training session. I strode over towards the small group of wolves, not failing to notice the eyes that fixated on the fresh mark on my neck. Several wolves dipped their heads in respect, but I did not have time for that. My eyes met Hell's and instantly. Guilt flashed in the beta's expression. He knew something. "Excuse me for a minute," he told the other wolves, jerking his head. Eli indicated I follow him. I ignored the stares I was getting and followed his hulking form. My anger was continuing to rise as I realized that, yet again, he'd been left out of the loop. Skydive Eli began, turning to face me, but I didn't give him time to finish. "Where is he?" "It was supposed to. Where is he?" Eli he is blocking me out. I have no clue what happened to him. He is fine. Skylar, he is doing that to protect you. How the hell is that protecting me? We just mated. And then I wake up to find his scent stale and his mental presence gone. Eli sighed, folding his arms in front of his broad chest. It seemed like he didn't want to be the one to tell me this. He left. Skylar, you wait. What? The alpha left. He met with me and spoke with Jack for several hours, saying he had to leave, that there was no other choice. He left us with detailed instructions on how to handle the pack until he takes care of the problem. He didn't tell you because he knew you would argue with him and try to stop him, even though HES doing the best possible thing for you and the pack. Leaving is the best thing. My voice had risen to a hysterical pitch. I could not control my rising hurt. And what problem? I was sure why I bothered to ask the last part. I already knew what the answer was. I just didn't want to hear it. The blood was rushing in my ears and I felt dizzy. The sense of abandonment I felt had increased tenfold. He went after Cain. I stood there, staring at Eli, transfixed with horror. It couldn't be true. I wouldn't accept that Gabriel had gone to take on Cain when there could have been another option. The look of regret in Ella's dark eyes, however, confirmed it, and so did Gabriel's alarming lack of presence in my mind. Gabriel had left a single-handedly take on the problem. My wolf howled mournfully, digesting the fact that we'd been left here by our other half. Just hours after mating, my mate was gone.